Back, folks. This is installment 3. Allison McDowell in Philadelphia and my friend Lynn Davenport in Dallas. Say hi, Lynn. And we know that you're on the edge of your seats, interested in finding out about immersive education modules masquerading as downloadable worksheets. And so this is our third installment. We just streamed the first one where we sort of gave a broad introduction to this idea of open education resources, because there's legislation and before the Texas legislature on funding this. It's not actually a new education system, but I guess scaling it in a big way. And then the second installment, we were really looking at this idea of applying virtual reality OER, so immersive reality, to all sorts of not just K-12 education, but reskilling, workforce models, and apprenticeships, and how that's really going to be the data streams that come off of these virtual reality experiences through wearable tech, including augmented and virtual reality, are going to underpin these large markets, these global hedge fund markets in human capital development. So those are the first two. And then this third installment, we're going to spend a little time actually looking at an event that happened last month, I guess, or within the past month in Austin. It was the opening of a new campus of Learn Capital. And that is a firm that invests in educational technology startups and has an interesting history. We've been tracking them for a while. In fact, a number of their principals and advisors are connected to Global Education Futures Forum, including Tom Vander Ark, which we talked about last time, like the deep rabbit hole of ed tech to transhumanism. And they have this lovely campus near the Capitol, and they conveniently offered up on LinkedIn a really nice 2.5-minute overview of their launch event, featuring many of the speakers and presenters. And I will just say, for a lot of people, they will ask me, like, well, how do you do your research? Like, how does it work? And I think they think that there's some maybe like complicated process, but really it literally is like, my friend goes, "Hey, Allison, want to look at a thing?" And I go, "Oh, I'm looking at the thing." And I'm like, "Who is at this thing?" And then literally you just start Googling the people.
And the thing becomes a thing.
A thing. And then you just go next, and you just keep pulling the thread. So this is an example of how we do it. You have good friends and they have good eyeballs and they're out looking in the space and they're bumping into people in elevators. And then all of a sudden you have a thing to look into. And so what we did was just in this section of the SlideShare, just lay out like, okay, who was in the room? And then what are their backgrounds? And then what story does that tell about what's actually going on here? So that's going to be installment 3. But so before we jump in, I just want to give Lynn a chance. She spent a couple more days in Austin this past week, and just to sort of bring us up to speed, if there's any things that breaking news or observations on your time at the Capitol.
Well, I was just thinking, we talk a lot about AI and predictive analytics, and we've always joked in my family, now we joke that it's facial recognition software. I can recognize people, whether it's celebrities who are incognito or people that you and I are researching. And so I'm at the Capitol really late, like till 2:00 in the morning a couple of nights ago, because all of these, education is like the hottest thing in Texas right now, because they're trying to push the vouchers and the education.
It's money. It's big money. This is not because all these people are staying up till 2 a.m, except the moms.
Huge.
Yeah,
right.
It's a lot of money.
And it's so interesting because the same people who broke the system in decades prior to what we're seeing, they're those same ones coming in wanting to offer the solutions, and the solutions are always, it's not just
they get the data with Fidelity, so you can be accountable.
Data with Fidelity, Texas 2036, and Margaret Spellings, and then you've got Florence Shapiro and these former legislators, and we've had Republican legislative control, Republican dominated Texas legislature for decades. So anyway. So we have this guy from Learn Capital, which you and I have covered this guy in multiple talks, but his name is Evan Baer. And so I see him and I recognize him. He's really bright blue eyes, and he's young. He's about my brother's age. He's about 10 years younger, or maybe more than I am. And And he has kids in that were, some of them were in Austin ISD, pulled them out. But we by chance met him in a hotel lobby when we were listening to a state board of education hearing and the final results. He was tuned into the same thing, so he was eavesdropping on our conversation. So we get to talking, exchange cards. I look him up. He is the managing partner or managing director of Learn Capital, who's a major investor of Amplify software, this open education resources technology we've been talking about. So then I see him at the legislature late that night, and this is about a special. It's a bill for vouchers for special needs kids, but there were multiple vouchers. So he was watching most of the evening and late afternoon. I would see him kind of coming in and out. And some of the people he was talking to are the ones tied to all of this privatization. So I know he has a vested interest in what happens with these bills, because it's not just this special ed voucher bill, it's also technology bills that he's deeply connected to, right? Okay, so it's all connected. And he gets up and he testifies, and they always start with some really, dramatic, very tragic, either a tragic story about their personal. And there was this teachers union rep, and she said, "Okay, should I start every talk with my brother, talking about a tragic death in her family?" And I thought, she's right. It's like everyone starts out with a story, emotional tug at your heartstrings. Yeah. When I get up there, I speak about the issue, and I just hit. I don't know. I guess I'm just different, but I see.
But I think that there must be something like, that all of these people are about neuroscience, right? They're all about the cognitive neuroscience. So there's probably some study that they've done that you accomplish you're able to exert your will over people if you start out that way. I'm sure it's a script. I mean, these are the people, because they're actually investing in these technologies that track all of the neural function in your brain. So these are the people who were sliding, kids into fMRIs to target the brain connection. So they get these things, and the power of story is so important. So I'm sure.
And if you're ruled by your emotions rather than, I've seen this over the years. When you're ruled by emotions, then it's it
probably throws their brain into a different space.
Yeah.
That an emotion, like an emotionally triggered space. There's probably a way it's balanced, and rather than operating from logic.
If you're ruled by emotions. Yeah. And your heart even can deceive you if you're not careful, because when they start out with these tragic events, of course, as an empathetic person, of course, that's horrible. But the point he made was this first traumatic event, and then the second one is his pitch for why he wants. And it's unrelated. It's completely unrelated. But it's to draw on those emotions to get the response they want and the outcome they want, right? So I feel manipulated. I know I'm being manipulated when they do that, and when they get up there and cry and they can cue the tears. This is all theater that we're seeing, and I resent it, because it's not. They're not being honest.
It's not forthright.
Yeah, it's not forthright.
Can I say one little thing that's related to spectacle, and it's kind of off topic, but not exactly. So my friend Steffers put on my radar today, and I'm going to have to dig in and do a much more comprehensive look. But it's this thing that's going through the alt resistance, biohacking, food sovereignty people thing, is this beef initiative. I don't know if this is on your radar. Robert Malone and all the big people are with Texas Slim, the beef initiative. And it's all connected to Bitcoin payments. And they're having these big sessions that are linked, and it's chain capital, and it's not just beef, it's literally Bitcoin beef. Exactly. And it's
all. There's the title. Beef and Bitcoin. That'll be our next segment.
Yeah. But but the people, he's operating out of Austin, right? He's like, I'm an old Texan, and we go way back, and you should be terribly scared, because they're going to make you bugs. They're going to make you put GMOs, and we need nice, clean, it's the accountability, right? Oh, we can be accountable for our beef supply, our sovereign U.S. red meat supply, if you just put it all on blockchain, right? And by the way, and I could see see the narrative that Texas Slim, who doesn't give his actual name besides that he's deeply connected to UT Austin, and some of the people with his venture capital firm are involved in like distributed emergent systems and neural networks and brain wave stuff,
Okay, beef, brains, and Bitcoin. There's the title.
Blood too. I think there could be some blood stuff too, some iron, some blood.
I can't take it.
Yeah, I know, but it's all coming out of Texas. And so it's like they tell the story. The story is like sovereignty. And you know who's buying all the beef? It's
Don't
China.
Don't me or my beef.
Yeah, China's buying our beef and we just want our own beef. And I'm saying this like, and they take something that has, like genuinely
it incites rage and
fear and then tribalism and like we're gonna put all our beef on blockchain so the Chinese can't get it. It's like it's like but it's the narratives of like
just
patriotism.
Like the voting. Look, we put it on blockchain, it's safe because our elections aren't secure.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? Beef actually help mitigate climate change because they create, regenerative agriculture, pasture stuff. But we could put that on blockchain and have some regenerative finance built in.
I know you don't think that's the case. You've said this is all deception. Explain that.
Well, the cow farts and the cow burps and the methane that they try to, put in there as far as one of the reasons that there is climate change going on is a CO2 argument that doesn't stand the test of time. Little do that people know that the land tools in which actually we do grow soil with, and that being, the cattle themselves, is one of the best things that we can do for our environment. It replaces, it does sequester, carbon into the soil. Our soil is unhealthy right now because of the multinational chemical and grain companies that we've been basically growing and stewarding our food for the last 50 years. That's the problem. We've destroyed our soil, and they're trying to cover up the fact that we have done that with the chemicals, the herbicides, the pesticides.
And so I think there's a lot of stuff going on and, including like bioelectricity, but you embed it, in the Texas framework? That's just like the education, right? If you can get the Texans to buy into it and wrap themselves in the red, white, and blue Texan, like sovereign, like American dream framework, like you're gold, really. I mean, for most of middle America, like you're sort of gold. And so Texas is this place, like you said. The people who are all behind this are Republicans. I mean, I'm not saying the Democrats, because where I am, they're Democrats, but it's not like the Republicans are fighting this. They're literally just rebranding it to say, well, you can have choice, you can choose, but the choice, we're not going to be upfront and tell you it's all on blockchain.
But you're so right. You are so
Beef
right.
or education modules. It's kind of the same playbook.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird that you could say, yeah, this is how they're doing beef, this is how they're doing education modules.
Well, I don't remember where Dr. Phil is from, but remember when he defended Oprah in that big beef case? We should look into if that's connected too from decades ago when Oprah was, they came after her the beef industry because she had made some comment. Do you remember that?
Interesting. I don't.
I'll look into
but see, it's modeling and simulation. So the people who are like connected to this have ties to UT Austin, and it's about emergent properties, right? Emergent systems. And so what a great example. Like that's why I keep saying they're fine for there to be resistance as long as it's tagged properly and they can monitor it and see how it evolves. And then all of the influencers come in and then they insert their thing. But I think it's really compelling that somehow both Texas and maybe to a slightly lesser extent Florida are really these vortices of this certain way of grooming a modular unit of how people think. And when you said it's all theater, exactly, it is all a theatrical simulation.
So we have to be very careful our response because that may be a desired response,
yes,
even though it would look as though, and this is what's so hard about the book battle, because it's not that you don't call out a nasty book that's inappropriate for a child, but that's the desired response because that polarization is necessary for people to pay attention so that they can move. Like, we talked about the Hegelian dialectic. Right. So you've got, book banners. No, we're book, freedom or whatever, book
Right.
We want
But that's not the
all books.
story, right?
That's not the story.
Let's have the story be, should we be putting children, instead of giving them paper books that they can read of their own choosing to spark their own imaginations, are we going to feed them digital content to program them? Like, that's the
Right,
thing
because
people
the
could
book
get
point-
behind.
It's a moot point if there are no books to begin with. Where
Exactly.
it's all digital where they want us to go. But the book, that battle will lead us straight there.
Exactly. Book battle,
Okay.
beef battle. Yeah. Okay, so part 3 is Learn Capital comes to Austin. And I thought that I would start off with maybe we could do a little sharing of images, recent images that, Lynn, this is a picture that you sent me that's on the left, and on the right is a picture I took at the Mayoral Education Conference in Philadelphia. So can you just tell me a little bit about the flying book children?
Well, the weirdest thing about it is it has to be the same the same artist, because in front of Richardson ISD's administration building, there's this old, 100-year-old, I don't know how old the building is, old red brick building that is our administration building. They have this bronze, these bronze statues of 2 little children with open books, and they're sitting on the bench outside the district. And I always find it, ironic because they don't really focus on books anymore. It's all technology. It has to be the same sculptor. I need to look it up. But so you've got these kids and I was kind of creeped out by it because I was at the Texas Education Agency, which is where the State Board of Education hearings are held. So I was bouncing, back and forth between the TEA and the Capitol because both were going on at the same time. So we come out of this and it's right off the elevator and just this big open area. And instantly I'm thinking, this is a global thing that we're dealing with. This open education resources, open book, you've got these children. The global initiative is around these open education resources, which the people pushing them through this Texas bill on education to bring in open education resources through Amplify, which is the Learn Capital invested software program and the company that they're using for this. So it just, it spoke volumes to me. You've got Texas, you've got the flags, you've got these children. I don't know. What do you see?
Well, it's interesting that the positioning of the globe, right? Like you might think that they would put North America like at the front. It looks like it's up against a wall, and it looks like that is the front because they don't have something on the back, like the lying down.
You can walk
shoulder.
around it, but not. It's on a tile, I think. So you can walk behind it.
But that's definitely the front, unless they had lying up,
front.
Yeah. So they've got Africa and South America. Which they've really been pushing so hard on the online education in those countries too, as part of the overall privatization plan. But it looks like an older sculpture. But I think the top is supposed to kind of look like a magic carpet, right? Like they're writing on the book, like to imaginary worlds or whatever, and.
Aladdin.
Yeah.
Right.
And the thing is, like, I love to read. Like, I don't know about you, but like when I grew up, we still had functioning school libraries. It was encouraged to read. Like the teachers would do classroom read alouds, classroom novels, and that was one of my like favorite childhood memories was that. And since the introduction of Common Core, the pivot is strictly to like nonfiction, right? Technical books. Like you don't really want fictional.
Nonfiction and a lot of occult. When you have a child, this is what I recognized because my best friend I was kind of like this dingy little kid, but we both got along really well. And she was this advanced gifted child who had a professor for a father, and she had her closet. She had this big closet that was sort of an attic space, and she had books everywhere. And I was more, just an average reader, read normal books for whatever my age, but she was so advanced that she would have to go to more adult content. And you run out of things for an advanced reader if you're as a parent that are age appropriate, because there's just not enough books. You probably mowed through so many books and ran out of things, and you're just craving more books, and you're going through the library trying to find things that are interesting.
I read there were these biographies of all of like the historic Americans. Like I kind of kicked my, and you could open it up on the inside covers, and they would have the lists of all like the explorers, the presidents, the whatever, like the inventors, and all the little, and like I would go through like during the summer, library group, and I would just like, oh, I didn't read that one yet.
See, and I love that but now because the children are sort of groomed and nudged into this world of occult, and so Harry Potter and all of those became such a big deal that if you go through the books, if you look at the bookstore or the library for children and what's on display, what catches your eye, it's all of the, I'm looking at this alchemy and astrology, wizardry poster that you have here. It's that kind of thing that catches their attention, fantastical, more magic, that kind of thing, and children with certain powers. So, it's unfortunate. And I know I have a friend who her daughter was running out of things, and then she's reading Bridges of Madison County, in 6th grade. Well, that's so my point is that the children don't have it. It doesn't seem to be enough to catch their attention if they're an advanced reader.
Well, even like librarians, like we, when in our elementary school, we had a library, and the librarian really kind of knew the kids, and she would take small groups around and go, oh, I know what you like. And then she would reach out a book and say, well, maybe you'd like this. I mean, you didn't have to check out the book, but like they knew it was a human relationship, right? It was, and I still remember this book, To Nowhere and Back, that I got out of the library. I actually finally found it, about a time traveling book, because I did like the fantasy stuff. But the librarians knew you. Now in Philadelphia, we don't have any librarians, really. I think we're down to like maybe 10 schools that even have a library with a certified librarian. And so who's doing the recommendation, right? Is it a person who knows you, or is it an AI algorithm? And so when I see that, I think, okay, so the OER are replacing the books, right?
Yeah.
It
it explicitly says that, and I've shown you what the Department of Ed says. It says equity, and then it says shifting the resources from textbooks to technology devices.
Right, because that yields more data, the apply, pull, whatever impact data. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so I think in this case, the plan is that there won't be books, and the books will be digital.
The other thing is that Texas, so we always, you and I know instinctively that Texas is a target, not just because of the sheer numbers of children, but there are other reasons. But look how Texas is there kind of in front of all of this. I think that's significant too. Yeah, for sure. And so on the right is an image that I took that I just found a little bit shocking. So on Tuesday morning, I attended, we're in the middle of a mayor's race in Philadelphia, and pretty much the Democratic primary is the mayor's race because the Republican never wins in Philadelphia. So, it's coming up soon. And so they were having a panel discussion with the candidates on education. And I'm really just not that excited at all about politics anymore, but I thought if I was going to engage at all, it would probably be on this topic. And it was at the Franklin Institute, which is the science and technology museum on the Parkway, and it's literally, I can walk to it from my house. So I had no excuse not to go. So, and it was sponsored by the Philadelphia Education Fund, which is the main push for privatizing education in the city. Although we know now it's not really just about the privatization, it's also about all of the other stuff behind it, the impact markets and the data and the AI. And interestingly enough, it was the program sponsor was the Education School of St. Joseph's University, which is on the border of Philadelphia and the Main Line, right on City Line Avenue, and it's a Jesuit university. And so for me, that was interesting because, again, the Vatican, which currently has a Jesuit pope, is in the lead on the social impact finance space, right? So I go down, and it was a ridiculous. I blogged about it, and I can stick this on the bottom, but nothing was said. It was sort of like nothing was addressed about the changes in the future of work or education technology or all of the upheaval. It was almost like they could have had the same conversation 20 years ago. Like, so tell me, how are you going to keep jobs in the city? Tell me how you're going to fund the schools. But just keep it surface level.
Super surface, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm working the room trying to get everybody to understand social impact bonds and securitizing children as capital commodities on blockchain. And I was getting a little bit, it was just frustrating because so many people were blank. They just don't care because it's just their job. They just go and they do career pathways and that's what they do. But at the end, I was talking with two people and it was a good conversation. And at one point I even said, which I don't normally say, something about, sometimes it feels like there's esoteric things at work here. Like I just said it to these people. And then a few minutes later, I looked up on the wall, and this is on the wall above where we were sitting. So in this big theater room, there were 4 exterior windows, and opposite every exterior window was one of these big wall paintings. And they were large, probably, 5 feet by 9 feet high or something like that. And it had 3 scientists, so Newton, Galileo, and Copernicus, whom I found out later all identified as practicing alchemy. Especially Newton was very big into occult practice, evidently. And then this was at the way in and the way out, the alchemy and astrology. And so, one of the next people we're going to talk about, they're connected with an entity called Merlin, which is like the wizard. But I think that some of this stuff, it's very strangely esoteric. And I and you've known me forever, Lynn, like that's not the first place I go for. There are some people that's their wheelhouse is always the esoterics and, and I don't feel one way or the other about that, but like I've always followed the money. But like sometimes you follow the money into the room and then you look around the room and then you see things that start telling you that there's other parts of the story going on.
Well, it's like that guy that was over the Health and Human Services. He came from Austin, and he's our Dr. Oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank on his name, but anyway, he is a magician. I read about him. He went to my high school, and he's an amateur magician, and he's over the Health and Human Services in Dallas. But he came from Austin, and at the time he was dealing in blockchain and healthcare too. While he was there, he's spoken on that. Yeah, it's really bizarre what we're dealing with. But I mean, I think we know that there are dark principalities, there are forces. This is spiritual in nature. That when you look at good versus evil in that realm, we shouldn't be surprised, but we are.
It's interesting, like when it just puts right in front. And again, the Franklin Institute is named after Ben Franklin. Like it's very scientific, right? And I think on many respects they want to diminish spiritual sides or other outside the norm thing, because we're just about science now, right? We're just about science, but like maybe that's more on the front of things and not always all the way through.
But even the church does that. It suppresses things that intuition and things that we are kind of trained to ignore.
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to play this. This is just a short, like 2.5 minute video with this Learn Capital launch. So they had a videographer to document it. I think you will see lots of virtual reality headsets in here, linked to financial instruments. And, as we said in the last episode, that the OER isn't really about downloading worksheets. It's about providing playlists of AI-mediated personalized learning. And then eventually, in the not too distant future, it will be immersive units. Like, so you're not just going to be watching a TED Talk on a screen. You're going to be immersing yourself in these. And look at this gentleman here, just in this image, how his whole head is contained and bathed in these electromagnetic frequencies, right?
It's like a new pineal gland on the back of his head there.
It looks like a parasite. It really does. So
what I find very exemplary is the event taking place today, where different portfolio companies are brought together and where they are also invited to share their questions or the challenges that they're facing and asking for help.
Definitely gives a feeling of camaraderie with other great companies that are doing amazing things for humanity.
Welcome everyone to the Learn Flourish conference. We have chosen to build out a campus, a headquarters here in Austin, Texas, to advance this mission of human flourishing.
We've been at this now for 13 years. We're focused on category-defining companies and human capital development.
There's a lot that we do at Learn, and there's a lot that all of you do. So there's a huge tent, effectively, of areas of passion. that individuals here possess.
Founder and CEO of Empath, Chairman and CEO of Ascent Funding,
Senior Fellow with the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity.
Kevin from Pathrise, Jin from Polygens, two of the most accomplished people in our portfolio.
Co-founder and CEO of Merlin Mind.
We are the world's largest online learning platform.
300 million users a month.
From 2021 to 2022, we've been able to about 2.8x. We're getting a little bit too much interest.
we pioneered a revolutionary product called an outcomes-based loan.
We are independently rated, all green on ed reports for our science program, perfect score for our DesMaster Math curriculum.
So what ESA does, it helps level that playing field for low-income Black kids.
This has a higher effectiveness for severe autism. And this is not after 10 years of ABA therapy. This is after a month.
All of human knowledge should be accessible at your fingertips at any time, instantly, serving the process of teaching and learning.
What we've developed is a telepathic system. So it's a system you can wear on your head, and you can control technology with your mind.
There's no money in this, you can tell. Like, they just have such a skinny budget, right?
Well, yeah, and he told us when we met him in the lobby, because we met him in the lobby of this charming old hotel called Ella, that he could walk to. So while the thing was being built, he tells us about this. Yeah, I'm building this campus, and he's all excited about it. And of course, at the time, we didn't know it was Learn Capital. But if you look at all the people who are involved, notice the one man said about ESAs, the education savings accounts. Yeah. That's the bill that Evan showed up to testify on. But he doesn't say, I'm from Learn Capital. I'm this, rich investor. And he says, I, have this tragic story, and that's going to segue into why you should do these education savings accounts. Doesn't mention his conflict of interest. I'm going to point out one more thing because of all the education technology people like the Amplify COO or whatever her position was, is that the iStation, the daughter of the billionaire who runs iStation, which is a reading response to intervention software piloted in districts across Texas, used for 20 years for reading. And of course, our reading is failing or down. So she points out, her name is Genevieve Collins. She ran for Congress. She comes to the legislature to push. Doesn't mention she works for iStation, doesn't mention that. But she's pushing the vouchers and the education savings accounts and says kids can't read. And I'm thinking, how ironic. Right? You work for a reading software company that's piloted and used by most districts in the state, much, and beyond, and yet doesn't point that out, doesn't talk about that. No. She's just there for Americans for Prosperity to push vouchers and an escape hatch for the system that she makes money.
Broke on purpose. Broke on purpose.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my soapbox. This video is so important because it encapsulates. It shows the entire model. Yeah. All the way up to the headset and the headsets and the immersive. And notice how that one guy said we need to be able to access the knowledge. So that means they want to access what we know. Right. Remotely. I think through these technologies, you're not even allowed to have your own thoughts anymore, that it's going to all be in the frequency. And that's a big complex. That's a lot of money. And then how about open it, like the child being the open education resources. Yeah. The thing to tap into. That's true. It's always the opposite. Mm-hmm. It's always the opposite. That's correct. And this is not far from the Capitol, right? What is it, Justice Hill or something? Judges Hill or something? Yeah, Judges Hill. And that hotel where I met him, I think a judge owned that too. It looks like a colonial, has the big columns. It looks like a plantation type house. In this campus, we keep meaning to go there. We run out of time because we're so busy jumping back and forth to places, but I am going to go check it out, and I will keep you posted. Yeah. That's another show. That's another show. Okay, well, let me just finish this out. I think we're in the dance scene part here. Gotta make it cool. Human venture capital.
Such a squad of individuals as we go and attempt to ourselves help entrepreneurs who are founding the next generation of learning companies.
I mean, it's an interesting logo too, that arrow. I think
in a box.
In a box, which is blockchain, right? And often that's the box itself, when it gets pivoted, turns into hexagon.
You take out the L and you got the word earn.
Learn to earn, right? Well, I think about the arrow and I think about cybernetics, right? It's a pathway. Like all of this is a planned pathway. And then you have the arrows, like you can see it throughout. Like I'm assuming that was overlaid on the video. I don't think that that's actually a floating arrow, but they emphasize the arrows a lot in this video, just a 2-minute video, it's there. So I feel like the cybernetic, the steering, because that's what the AI is going to do for you. And that's what your financial arrangements are going to do, is they're going to keep you on the straight and narrow arrow, but somebody else made the arrow for you.
Yeah, and flourish. I think that word flourish is something to be examined too. The human flourishing, and that's in his mind, in his vision for what he thinks a human and how a human should flourish, and it's quite the opposite of how you and I would want our children to flourish.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if I'm thinking, if I can't remember if I talked about this already, but this was wall art in the lobby, and this idea of a swirl, of the spinning, like even I guess that's a cat in the upper, like a more figurative, but there is like a wave, a frequency pattern, I feel like. And that is what these digital objects will be infusing our biologies and our psyches with a frequency that is modulated through AI.
Yeah, it's waves, it's currents, it undulates. And then if you look at that bottom right one, that one to me is the toroidal, the heart and the earth. Everything is moving.
Yeah,
in a torus.
The spin. So I was going through sort of slow-mo the video to see what things I could pull out. And I was trying to look at these name tags and see if I could see the first names really easily, but not so much the last names. But this one I could read. It was Ravi Koku, and he got a handwritten one. Evidently he didn't get his RSVP in on time.
He was late. This is exactly what I do when I go to these events. I very discreetly take pictures of all the name tags on there, because it speaks volumes.
Exactly. That's perfect. And so again, we were talking, a second ago about the wizard, right? These alchemy wizard sorcerers. And they straight up, like the company, he's the chief technology officer at this company called Merlin Mind. So it's Merlin, but with a Y instead of an I, like the wizard from King Arthur. And he had ties to UT Austin. And so I'm just going to actually read from his LinkedIn the description, because this is something I keep trying to hammer home with people about the distributed systems and the teaming and the steering, because I think that this says a lot. So Ravi Koku, co-founder and CTO at Merlin Minds, which is based in New York, Yorktown Heights. Ravi has wide-ranging experience in distributed systems, and I emphasize that, operating systems, networking, analytics, and intelligent tutoring platforms. Okay, so that's your personal assistant of your mind. At IBM, TJ Watson Research, he provided research leadership for Sesame Workshop and Deacon Digital Engagements while using and developing Watson technology for education. So the Sesame Workshop is huge, and we've talked a lot. I mean, that was just in that last episode about the USB port, right? Naps. We want to teach children with naps. We're just going to program them while they sleep. And the guy's like, well, that won't work. And he's like, not till we have a USB port in their brain.
We are here today to talk about breakthrough learning in a digital age along the longest street in the world, Sesame Street. And I want to give you a little bit of perspective from the workshop's point of view about where we're all taking this and how we're looking at all of the things that Connie talked about and how children are engaging with media in a Sesame Workshop context. In order to do that, you really got to go back to Sesame Street's humble beginnings. Hey, Gary, baby! Grover! Grover, what are you doing here?
Oh, well, I came for the kugel.
The what?
You know, the kugel, the cute and delicious Yiddish treat.
Please excuse me, I'm in the middle of a talk.
Oh, a talk! I love talks. Oh, perhaps I can help you. Is it a talk about the Industrial Revolution?
No.
Oh, good, because I know nothing about the Industrial Revolution.
Well, then that really worked out well.
Well, is it they talk about getting better abs in 30 days?
No.
Oh, that is too bad. Because as you can see by my amazing physique, I really know a lot about rock-hard abs.
Grover, it's not about any body parts.
Oh, well,
No.
then tell me, what is this talk about?
Well, it's about really teaching kids using digital technologies and new media.
Teaching kids using new technology? Oh, Gary, this is your lucky day because I know a lot about new technology. Mm-hmm.
Are you sure?
Am I sure? Gary, do you see that edge right there?
Yep, I do. Yep.
I cut right through it, Gary. I cut right through it because I am on the cutting edge of new technologies.
Well, I didn't know that.
Oh, it is very true. And I can help teach the children of the world using my new technologies.
Okay, I hate to ask questions, but could you tell me one new technology that you use to help teach children?
Well, Gary, I think we could teach the children using iPhone apps.
Well, it's true, Grover. In fact, there are some apps that, everybody uses.
No. Not apps. Everyone is doing the apps. No, I am talking about iPhone naps.
Naps, okay?
Yes.
You're going to have to explain that one.
Well, it
Grover.
is easy. You can put lots of information on your iPhone, right?
Right.
Well, then you just have to take a nap with the iPhone next to your head, and all that information in the phone will import directly into your sleepy little noggin.
I don't think that's going to work either, Grover.
Well,
no.
Not yet, but once I develop a USB port for the forehead, it will work like gangbusters. Would you like to volunteer your forehead?
No.
But Gary, it is for the children.
I mean, what a time saver. Can you think of it?
Right. Oh, gosh. Okay, so he was also connected to, he was spent 3 years at IBM Research in India, and we know India is a huge target. And at one point I had these ideas about having a show that was connecting like Dell Technologies with what was happening in India, but haven't done that yet. But there are, you wouldn't necessarily think of Austin and India, being connected, but they are through the educational devices. He was responsible for running innovation initiatives with IBM's telecom clients, Vodafone and Bharti Airtel. So the phones are the delivery devices. And I think we need to understand that education technology, especially in the global south, is going to be focused on ICT, individual communication technologies, not so much even the Chromebooks. It's going to go smaller and smaller until it goes into your headset. And then eventually they just put it on your augmented reality contact lenses or something. So it says his previous work includes adaptive self-tuning systems. And I'm going to emphasize that, adaptive self-tuning and how that relates to frequency modulation. IoT systems analytics and management and network virtualization and large-scale communication network analytics. So he's looking at phones and networks and tuning them. Now, I think they would probably say like, oh, we just tune things to find, the optimum frequency or the bandwidth or the best service for the least power or something like that. Like we're just routing things to give everybody the best of the best. But I think we have to understand that as biohybrid beings connected through our device, like we are part of the tuning network. He got his PhD from UT Austin and has gotten a lot of awards. He spent 5 years at NEC Labs, America, and 7 years at IBM. So so these are the kind of folks that are at the event.
Wow.
Right? But the ant computer, right? This is what I'm trying to say. Like if you went in there and tried to explain that to the legislators, do you think any of them even had the conceptual awareness, or even the blockchain task force of understanding that it's about engineered networked systems?
Actually, ironically, the guy who led the blockchain task force, I think that if I could sit down with him, I do think he would get it. And when you say ant computer, what you're really meaning is that because ants are led by pheromones and they're directed, it signals is that the same thing is happening with us, and that's where they're taking
The nudges.
Whether
like
what?
Nudges, but like
Nudges.
conscious and unconscious. Because a lot of it is unconscious, or, you know, and they're very good at that. They've been developing, you know, that kind of entrainment for a long time.
And even with the, you know, with the hashtagging and the geo tagging and the like what you were talking about earlier, it's and with marketing and with I guess it's signals intelligence. I don't know, but it is nudging and leading. So there are people who answer the call. And so it's not that they know that they're connected to all these other things, but they're answering the call. And if they're all moving in that same direction, it is like ants.
Right.
It's just following a trail that they're being led to, and all of their energy, all of their efforts and their work or their initiatives and their lobbying or their bills, all of those move in that direction.
And it's decentralized. I mean, that's the thing. We're not saying that all of the people involved actually understand, but like the people I was trying to talk to at the mayoral forum, they have their incentives, right? They have a job. Their success in their job or their social milieu depends on following certain rules. And so they follow those rules, and they follow them willingly, I think, because what they're inhabiting is a story. But
they're rewarded along the way. I think that's an important piece too. That could be the
reinforcement,
little motivations along the way, whether it's an award, whether it's payment, whether it's status, whether it's connections to, you know, the cool kids or whatever. There are rewards along the way. It happens in education. You know, those who comply and do the, you know, they join these innovative initiatives, they get rewarded and promoted. So it's a sort of teams and clubs that do this, or chambers.
Yeah. And I would say individually, like, that's the thing about the ants. They say individually, they're not that smart. Like individually, they just follow certain rules and do certain patterns. But if you can modulate the pattern of the ants working together, you can create these really sophisticated systems. And so there's actually not any incentive to create super smart ants, because they might not cooperate in the way that you need them to cooperate to build the superstructure, right? The organic superstructure. So you want them to not be that self-motivated, self-driven, critical thinking on their own, because then it's kind of like the military chain of command. Things fall apart. If you have too many people thinking their own ideas and not just doing the thing, then the whole program falls apart, and that's not what you want. So
and that's why somebody like me, they'd go, well, what does she know? She's not credentialed. How could she? Why does she think she's so smart? Because you and I are not led by, we're not inside that system. So being outside of it, it actually does give us a higher level of intelligence to be able to see it, because they're so stuck on the inside, and the credentials give the illusion that they are smart or wiser and they're the experts, but they're all in their own little silos or their niche, you know,
they've been initiated into a story, and the story that these people there are opportunity gaps, right? There's education gaps, there's divides. Our charge is, as entrepreneurs and creative technologists, to bridge that divide and bring these young people into the digital emerging tech economy so that they can, but then no one ever thinks, so then what, right? So then we've got, like, you know, the Grovers saying they want to put USB ports in children's heads, you know, like, and nobody stops to think of the ethics. And I was having this kind of like discussion with my husband this morning, like in the kitchen. I was like, you know, and he's connected to Penn. And I said, you know, I'm really concerned about, he was excited because he actually found someone who wanted to be an art history major. And evidently the person's parents said, well, you can't be, you have to be something else. So they did politics, but they got enough to have an art history double major. So they couldn't have it as their, and I'm like, yeah, because we're the most dangerous people. We're some of the most dangerous people. But I said, you know, the business people and the science people, they all just stay in their lane. They're like, I do this one narrow thing. And then they don't think of the implications of what it is that they're building. And that's on purpose. So this is another guy who was at the event, who is the co-founder of the Merlin Mind, Satya Nita, also at IBM. And it's talking about, at Merlin Mind, we believe the future of work will involve people working with a digital assistant equipped with micro automations. Okay, so that's like your extended mind. like your mind is Merlin. And it says that he was involved in something called BIAL, Silicon Technology, with a focus on keeping Moore's Law demand scaling on track. So I think that this idea of Moore's Law and like the exponential computing power is eventually blending us into the human machine hybrid. Like, I think that's being built into the Moore's Law phase, and that he was specifically involved in microelectronics divisions. So you've got these frequencies, you've got, this is the next gen smart board. Remember when they were installing all the smart boards? Like, that happened when my kid was in elementary school. All of a sudden, everybody got grants. Nobody really saw them as surveillance devices or frequency modulation devices or digital twinning devices. They were just like, oh, and the teachers, a lot of them were like, well, I don't need that. But they were like, well, somebody donated them, so you have to have them in the classroom. And so that's,
no, you need it. Right.
That you need it. And even on the laptop, it's interesting, like programming, it says the magic of migration is on. So again, that's a distributed system just thing that that's the image that they chose to put on there. There's just a picture of it. Freedom to teach, right? That even though the freedom, what they're saying is the future of work is your digital assistant teaches you.
Freedom.
Domination. Yeah.
Domination. Yeah.
So here's Preston. Preston is very concerned about return on investment in education. And, I don't know if you remember back, but like when I used to listen to NPR, and I'm not saying you, but I remember like commuting and listening to NPR and hearing about like Obama and saying like, oh, we're going to make sure that there's value in your college education, and we're going to track. And it was, again, set up problem solution, like, these for-profit schools, or some of them that were ripping people off. We're going to take care of that now. We're going to make sure that you're getting the most for your money. And so, here comes Preston Cooper, and he's with this free op thing. I don't exactly know what free op, something, freedom of opportunity or something like that. But guess who his mother was? His mother was the acting chair of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission under Clinton.
Oh, so literally mother commodities future trading.
Yes. And she chaired the FDIC under Bush and Obama. So she's the total bipartisan, like, money gal. And she was a key policymaker during the financial crash. So surely Preston doesn't know anything about financializing human people as commodities, right?
Yeah, that's so nice of him to want to help us.
Yeah. Help, probably, I'm sure they really want to help all the kids of Houston, once they take over their district and whatever, set them up on some sort of coding boot camp. But so he worked for the Manhattan Institute and the American Enterprise Institute, which are like understood as sort of conservative leaning think tanks. He got his PhD in economics at George Mason in Virginia, which is Koch Industries funded. And then it says he is best known for his pioneering work on returns on investment for college and university degrees that compare what they cost to what students earn. Well, how are you going to find that out, Preston?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe put them on some sort of device.
Learn card blockchain identity. So Preston was at the event. And then this other guy, Carlos Gutierrez, who was the former Secretary of Commerce under Bush. He was a promoter of NAFTA. So again, free trade, breaking down the economic barriers to trade. So thinking about what is coming with that next with virtual.
Well, who was the biggest champion? Who was sounding the alarms on NAFTA the loudest? Ross Perot.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So he was part of that. So, and then, but before that, he had spent 30 years at Kellogg. Okay. So until I had looked into the eugenics stuff, that would not have sounded any alarms for me. Like Kellogg, like cornflakes, right? Like that seems like
cereal,
a pretty boring job.
From cereal to, then they have the whole social justice movement with, the Dallas Truth and Racial Healing, and that's funded by Kellogg.
Oh, tell me about it. Okay.
Yeah, his name, oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank because I haven't had any sleep. But he is, he's connected with the education cabal here in Dallas. But yeah, Kellogg funded it, and I tweeted him a couple times. You do realize you're funded by this whole, and I've connected your stuff with the Kellogg research, and he doesn't have a clue.
He doesn't respond.
He's just got his role.
Yeah, my role is to heal things. So now Mr. Gutierrez is working for a company called Empath, AI-driven insights to guide your talent strategy. Empath works with any HR system of record. Our machine learning algorithms infer skills from existing company data. Isn't that creepy? So like imagine your stupid performance reviews or whatever. Like now it's not even going to be an annual review. Probably they'll have some sort of like real-time data flows that are assessing your skills and inferring things from it. It works with any skill framework to determine skills. Now, our accuracy is 95%. More than 75% of skills discovered and previously unknown to the company and the employee. So like, what are they saying? Like the AI knows people better than they know themselves, or they can just tag people? Like this is about metadata tagging.
In the name empath, obviously there's a lot of research right now or out recently on, or I don't know if it's research, but just tagging people as, well, I'm an empath. Well, I'm this is how I feel, rather than.
Well, it's group mind. It's moving towards the group mind. Like if you can get in someone else's skin, like, and again, I'm not saying don't be empathetic, but there's a reason that they're using that narrative. Like,
I mean, people say to me all the time that you're an empath, because sometimes I can feel people are crying and I'll start tearing up. They're not visibly crying, but I know they're hurting on the inside, and I can feel it.
Yeah.
But no, this is a manipulation of empathy. And Jerry Hawkins, that's the name of the guy who's funded by Kellogg with the Dallas Truth and Racial Healing. I just thought of his name. It comes to me eventually.
Well, and the thing about the skills transference, like, so they will use things like the military, like ex-military, to say, and that came up in the mayor's thing in Philadelphia. Oh, well, what about veterans? So you're credentialed as a paramedic in the military, but then that doesn't match the credential in the community, right? So it's non-transferable. So in that way, it's almost like they're making the problem so they can offer the solution. But what they're trying to do is like they'll run people who have done military service through and then say, okay, here are your skill sets that are transferable on your blockchain ledger. Like we will vouch for you on your blockchain ledger that you have these skills, which is again not unlike LinkedIn, I guess, right? You have, I only have a fake LinkedIn account, but I think like if you used it robustly, you would have people verifying your skills, right? And then this is all related. So so we've got this guy, he's connected to let's see, this idea of like global labor, Kellogg's, empath. And so then I have Kellogg's. So in addition to what you said about the Dallas Racial Healing, the Kellogg Foundation is one of the key drivers behind the Universal Basic Income pilots. Okay. And so they were starting. So they started in Mississippi. And again, that's not a shocker, but in this case, this is an article called from last February, The New Capitalism, a new basic income pilot will give $500 a month to mixed immigration status families. So I could see that would, tie into the border states. Now this is New Mexico, and they're talking about connecting with an Oakland-based nonprofit, Up Together. Now I've done some research on Up Together. At the time, and they've taken it off their website because I was looking at it for Philadelphia, but Jerry Brown, former Governor Jerry Brown, was tied to it. And they actually had like a social networking site where they were supposed to talk about like what they were doing to improve their conditions, and it would develop a hustle score for the families. And the families had to log onto these platforms and talk about what they were doing. And then there was social networking attached to it, framed as mentorship. So it wasn't just free money, that it was connected to this data mining program. And that was funded in part by Kellogg with undocumented or mixed status immigrant families. So again, framed as we care about these people, but in reality, just using them for this new form of, it's an investment market, but it's in AI and predictive analytics.
It looks like a Rubik's Cube.
It does.
And it's over I've always found the New Mexico flag to be an interesting symbol with.
It's like, is it a sun and like a cross kind of thing?
Yeah, but it's some sort of symbol that I think has something to do with Native American and indigenous. I don't know for sure.
There's a lot of, New Mexico is also highly militarized, and the labs, both Sandia National Lab and Los Alamos, and then the Santa Fe Institute, which is not military, but sort of intermixed with Los Alamos and Sandia, private. So a lot going on with, tagging and prediction, complexity simulation, all of it. And I know that there was a pay for success finance programs in New Mexico in housing.
And wasn't there a Harlem Children's Zone? Oh yeah, through SMU. It was like Harlem Children's Zone, but it was in New Mexico. Taos Children's Zone, and that Jeffrey Canaday and you've covered it before.
Yeah. Well, so this is just a slide that's talking about John Harvey Kellogg, which is one of the Kellogg brothers. They were Seventh-day Adventist, and they were really, it's interesting actually if you think about it, because they were very much involved, their faith practice in like nutrition. So it was like vegetarian, early soy, cornflakes. They had, I don't know, sort of bathing rituals like cold baths and all sorts of, they would have these spas, which were up in Michigan and Battle Creek, Michigan. That's right, because we were kind of conditioned to that. I don't know about you, like there used to be ads for the cereal companies like in the 70s. I always remember like, send your post box tops to Battle Creek, Michigan. Like there was something like you collected box tops.
I totally took debate on those things. I'd fill it out. You'd be sitting there eating your cereal, reading the box. I want to join that club.
Send your things to Battle Creek, Michigan.
Trinket that they're going to mail me for sending it in. And
right.
Them.
I know. We had no idea what it was, Lynn. So yeah.
There's a database of cereal eaters out there for sure.
Right. We ate too much cereal. So when I was doing all of my research around the Human Betterment Foundation, which was the West Coast version of like the Cold Spring Harbor Eugenics Records Office, that the Kellogg family was very much embedded in that, and this idea of optimization, which, I'm just saying, like, I'm not, the thing about eugenics and that it does have a racial component, but I think more than that, it's also searching for genius, pushing for optimization. Now, of course, at the time they had genius attached to like certain people of certain races, that sort of thing. But there is this thing of, it's not just this idea of eugenics is killing people that are less than, but which did get co-opted from the Cold Spring Harbor lab research by the Nazis and used during the Holocaust. So that definitely did happen. But a lot of it was this optimization metric, which I think very much fits into the OER and these health protocols, and really, like, honestly, a lot of the biohacking stuff that goes along with the alt health things. And that's going to bite people in the butt, because there's a lot of co-optation that's going on in the biohacking space that's going to feed into another track towards, human plus stuff. But I think not just the body, but also the mental state. And as I mentioned in the last session, that I think that there is something about like a synthetic telepathy or a psychic or an extrasensory perception, or expanding our senses through frequency beyond what we normally understand as normal through this. And I think that this is a thread that's been running through since the early 20th century with these folks, is tapping into genius, people who have unusual capacities that are outside the normal frame, and then trying to reverse engineer that.
Wow. So Kellogg, being a eugenicist, but also has a company for cereal, is working behind the scenes with all of these eugenics, with the eugenics work.
Yeah.
But then fast forward decades later, you have the Kellogg Foundation then using a black man, Jerry Hawkins is a black man, to using Kellogg Foundation money to then create this whole Dallas Truth and Racial Healing thing. I find that so fascinating that you can see this, where it's leading, but
if you think about it, so this is one of the other aspects. Remember, like where was it? The guy Satya Nidda with Merlin Mind. He's talking about technologies with a focus on keeping Moore's law scaling, and I think that keeping Moore's law scaling relates to a melding of human and machine, and a tapping into some of our creative psychical ability, which is, and within that, this is something I was,
but also tapping into civil unrest and civil and segregation issues, which I that's the part that it's as if, so they can take the segregation and the redlining and the sins of the past, and then in the future use it as a means to access a whole other you can really tap into those emotions because it's painful.
Right.
What happened to these marginalized communities who then will work to their own detriment. They're being manipulated. That Jerry's being manipulated for a cause that's not what he thinks it is. Keep going. Sorry.
Well, no, but I would just say the other piece of this, which seems critical to the computation, is that, the other guy was working in MEMS, like micro electromechanical machines, and then they have NEMS, which are nano electromechanical machines, MEMS and NEMS, and that's the nanobots, right? That we've talked about. Jose Ferreira, talking about, education is the most data mineable till we got nanobots, and then maybe health data will be outperform education data, but some of those NEMS are actually made out of melanin. Now they're developing it synthetically, but melanin is actually a really complex optical material. And so the future of computing is light based and optical based. And so they're using melanin based nanoparticles to create things for imaging, medical delivery. It's very conductive. And so
you're saying darker skin
would
be more desirable for...
I think that it's, and this is somewhat speculative, but I think that the way in which people access light and process light through their body, and this isn't just people with darker skin, but also animals. Melanin is in fur and in feathers and in other materials. Like, it's because they're photonic materials of how you interface with light, that there may be something also that is extended into like the pineal gland, because there's also melatonin in the pineal gland. So there may be certain populations may be identified as particularly useful for this new kind of computation if their biological infrastructure will allow this light-based computing, right? Like if a group that was identified as less than in some other era that now is identified as having interesting opportunities at a nanoscale, is they have new information scientifically for these new kinds of, light-based sorcery or whatever they've got going on, then you would want to contain those people on a universal basic income, on a blockchain in the name of racial healing, right? So that you could offer the solution that would actually embed them into a digital frequency network that would allow you to tap into some of that capacity. So as a unit of the ant computer, people who have higher melanin content may be offering something exceptional into this computational system. Wow. And I,
well said, Allison.
I don't know how else to say it, but like they create.
That was one sentence too.
Sorry.
And grammatically correct.
But that's how it feels to me. Now someone can prove me wrong, but that's what it's looking like.
I hear you. I hope everyone else can hear you.
It's complicated. It's a hard conversation to have because, again, we're not discounting that harms happen. But sometimes I wonder about the simulation. Like in simulations, they can speed time up or slow time down. And I'm like, is the thing that we're existing in a construct, which again, the IEEE people think we're already in a simulation? Is there a contract such that there's someone outside of it who could speed time up or down? And if so, then the harms of redlining and segregation and civil rights from 60, 70 years ago might just be a click, and then we're jumped into it. So this idea of like they couldn't have planned it out that far. What is the story that this could be so coordinated? But I don't know. If there's some way of getting outside of the experience and speeding time up, you could create a framework of steering people. And even more so once you get everyone on OER and get the AI embedded in their mind and you've got their personal assistant whispering in their ear what to do next, you could just program it and let the simulation model run, towards a certain outcome.
Before you go into this, I want to point out, because it's Notre Dame, Father Hesburgh and Kellogg that you're about to talk about, is that probably the loudest voice in pushing as far as testimony in favor of the education savings accounts, the banking schemes to bring in the vouchers and the universal school choice, which is like UBI for children. So that's the Catholic Church, and the Catholic bishops were there in full force in support of the education savings accounts. And I think that I do not believe that's a coincidence. And I also, I thought of this, and I just emailed it to you because Evan Baer was at the Vatican. The Learn Capital guy was at the Vatican.
Whoa.
I know. So you can put that in there. It was a LinkedIn post. If you just follow him on LinkedIn, he tells you exactly what he's doing, where he's going, because he's very proud of it. And it's shocking, really. You know what we know. It's shocking. So he goes to the Vatican. So if you want to insert that later, you can. But there is the Catholic influence, the Jesuits, the dismantling of public ed, the privatization agenda. And if you look at the Catholic schools, have all taken most have taken the federal money and the strings that go with it. So then they have to comply. I think it's significant. And this, of course, Patterns for Lifelong Learning book is really amazing when you see how long this has been, the roots and the seeds have been planted.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, and just to reemphasize that mayoral forum on education was sponsored by St. Joseph's, which again, Jesuit Catholic University. And I will say, like during the session, Alan Dom, who is an at-large city council person who made his money in real estate, like luxury condos at Rittenhouse Square, like luxury restaurants and other things, he's working very closely with the biotech folks, but he's on a lot of boards, and he's on the board of Cristo Rey.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, do you want to tell people, like, because you have Cristo Rey in Dallas, in Texas, if not in Dallas or just in Texas, because we were talking about Cristo Rey before.
Yeah, Cristo Rey charters. They are. I think they're only in Dallas. They may be in Texas, but I know of them in Dallas. And Jerry, right? Reasoner. I'm forgetting how to say his last name. But I just happened to meet him at a thing on social impact investing. And it was about Anand Giridharadas, or however you say his name, about billionaires and how they've created the problem, and then they're bringing in the solution through impact investing. And then this guy, I sit by him at this talk about, it was Social Venture Partners, and the head of Social Venture Partners who was speaking on it. It was just ironic because the guy actually literally is doing what Anand was supposedly exposing.
Supposedly, yeah. But they're all hanging out having lunch
Gary is in there. Reisner. I'm sorry, I'm so tired.
No.
But he's the opportunity zones guy for Dallas. And
okay.
So
that's an overlap.
Happens to be in the charter school model for this Cristo Rey, and I'm thinking it's connected. The real estate, the opportunities.
Well, that's what we talked about some with the Flow Life. Yeah.
In Flow Life we talked about this. So we can.
I just want to reemphasize it. So in Philadelphia, what we saw was that, a number of years ago, probably maybe in the 90s, they started, of course, there was the whole child sex abuse scandals, and then there were financial implications for the Catholic Church, and they were scrambling for money, and they start closing the parish schools. So the parish schools get gradually closed down. Then in a lot of those low-income communities, they also closed the public schools. And so then at the time, the only accessible school nearby would be a charter school, but sometimes the charter schools were not by right admission. You had to apply, and you may or may not get in. So then they reopened new Catholic schools, but they weren't based out of the parish. They were called mission schools, and they were run by something else. But they were not grounded in the community. They were a different type of Catholic school. And then a big interest behind that was Jerry Lenfest, and Jerry Lenfest made his money in cable television, and he was with the Navy, right? So you've got Navy and frequency, and then you have cable, and he was Catholic. And so the Lenfest Foundation, along with the William Penn Foundation, have been the major forces in privatizing education in the city, like paying for the major reports. And so all of this gets wrapped up in Cristo Rey then as well, and which I think is a high school. It's not for the little kids, but
what is that? Christ? What is Rey? Rule? Rey? It's Rey.
Ray King, I think. R-E-Y King, Christ the King.
Rex, Ray. Yeah. Okay.
And so their model was a work-based learning model. And so often what would happen would be like the tuition it wasn't free, but then corporations would get tax credits for offering tax opportunity scholarships. So families would get a large portion of the tuition covered, but then they would still have to pay some money, which was more than they would have paid if they had a functioning neighborhood school. Right? But so the people are out of pocket a little bit of money. The businesses are getting the tax credits for running it through the tuition, the scholarship programs, and then they look so good because they're giving poor kids opportunities. And yet a core piece of that was a work-based learning program. So the children were put into working environments, right, at least a day a week as part of their scholarship programs. And so that was the work-based learning. And it sounds great to a certain extent. Like some people would be like, yeah, kids need practical experience. They need to be, but the work that they're putting the kids into isn't actually representative of the future of work as it's actually planned, right?
And I just said this at the state board because
No,
you're
go ahead.
training them for something in 8th grade, which won't even be necessarily relevant by the time they graduate. And yet they are not getting the most basic things while they're in school because of this workforce model. Yeah, I spoke on this exact thing.
Yeah. And what I would say is probably the people who are offering the jobs to these high school kids are like the, big accounting firms, the big law firms. Like they're not doing basic high school level jobs that you like normal high school kids used to get for the summer jobs. Like they're not bagging groceries and stuff. They're being placed. And so those children will be groomed. And this is how the time span, like, so you wonder, so how does this gentleman end up fronting the Kellogg Foundation, right? Well, what you do is you create these systems that bring children in, and then you screen them who are good candidates for good fits to be the face of your program 20 years from now, right? And you place them in the law firms, in the biotech labs, in the things, and then you hold their hand and you're very nice to them and you bring them along. And these kids who maybe didn't have opportunities are like, these people are all awesome. Like, I love this. This is perfect for me, right? And then they get a scholarship to go to Brown or, Princeton or someplace, Georgetown, and then they get up and then boom, they're at the American Enterprise Institute or something. Like, and then, but they have this, and most people wouldn't imagine that they have this time frame, but I think that they do have this time frame. And so Cristo Rey is a central piece of getting the front piece, but then again, normalizing work-based learning as part of the educational model, which is central to the competency-based plan.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
yeah, and you also mentioned the tax credit scholarships, and that was also mentioned at the legislature, and it sounds good, but it's for a bigger purpose, and most people can't see that it's to feed them into something else.
Yeah. So do you want to mention Hesburgh? Because I think you were the one who actually told me to get the book originally. So
well,
this
Alice Linehan she had done one of her interviews years ago with someone, I want to say it was Diane Anderson, and the cover of she used this Patterns for Lifelong Learning book on the cover, and the original has the cover.
It has this
666
swirly thing,
and the trilateral, or the 3 parts in constant motion, almost like a toroidal circular thing. So yeah, so Alice was the one who clued me into it. I ordered the book, I read it. I was amazed at how long ago this was, in the 70s. But the 70s was a kind of a pivotal time.
Yeah.
There was a lot of transformation in this global initiative in the 70s, so early 70s. And so Father Hesburgh, he advised most of the presidents. He was highly influential. He was sort of like a celebrity in a way. And I watched the movie. I went to go see Hesburgh, the movie. And I knew that there was something more significant in this storyline than what we were being told or shown. He was highly political, but he was involved in the civil rights movement. You'll see him marching with Martin Luther King. And of course, you and I would be in full agreement that all of the segregation, the racism, all those things, I mean, we absolutely should denounce that. So we're not in disagreement with the work he was doing, but but he was playing a role during a time that would be significant for what we're seeing now and being used as a tool for another. I mean, the story is significant in order to usher in this new sort of digital imprisonment or digital slavery, I guess we've used that term before too, or digital enslavement. So the Vatican, the Catholic Church, the priests, they're all working. It seems to be in tandem with, like you said, the ant computing, moving us in this direction.
Right.
That's about.
And even, I mean, the title of the book, Patterns for Lifelong Learning. So you've got patterns, which is kind of what touches on what I've been looking at with Michael Levin lately, right? The morphogenesis and the how does the organism develop? It's not just the genes, the programming in the genes, it's actually also bioelectricity and frequency and patterning. So there's a pattern connected. And then the lifelong learning is clearly on the ledger, right? And it's hard because on the one hand, yeah, I think we would all agree that you don't want to stop learning things, right? But this idea that there's a permanent guided system of learning acquisition that's somewhat enforced or coerced is something, it's kind of shocking to imagine that that's, over 50 years old. These ideas go back that far.
Well, and the dismantling of the education system. So what it's ironic because this is Notre Dame, renowned institute for learning. And, it's difficult to get into Notre Dame, even, decades ago. So if you read the book, you realize that they're actually setting up the dismantling of the whole university system because we should just be in this lifelong learning pattern. We don't really need to go to a college, and that's not accessible to the masses. It's only a select, more elite group that gets in. To get into college, the process is not fair, and taking the top 10%, and they can come up with all kinds of reasons why college should be.
And it's crazy expensive. I mean, it's crazy expensive.
Yes, and then it's not because of the cost of college, because the inflated cost of college, and it's not reasonable to go get a degree in teaching when you pay $120,000 or $180,000 to get a degree, and you go make $40,000 to $60,000. You can't pay that off in the time, in a reasonable amount of time. So that imbalance, so that all is setting up for there's credentialing. So you're not in which it doesn't call it that in the book, but you can see that's what they're talking about. What if you could just learn outside of, anywhere, any place, and you can
get credit for it in a video game, a school in a video game. Right?
Yeah. So if you read the book, it's interesting because it was very much setting up for, what we're seeing today. Yeah. It's
well, and I just want to say, right around the same time, I did a live recently that talked about this Ira Levin's This Perfect Day. It was also, this is 1970, I think that was 1973, but it was imagining a world run by a supercomputer called Unicomp. And people would get monthly injections of chemotherapeutic drugs to keep them docile and managed in the giant supercomputer.
Oh, well, we're there.
Right. And so I think that they knew this in the 1970s. Like, they knew that this is where they wanted to take the computing system, right? And in some ways, and I say this not to diminish people's personal faith practices, but for centuries, organized religious institutions were sort of the ultimate social program, right? To contain society and to keep it functioning. Not just Christianity, other religions, but they provided a structure to life, right? And a hierarchical system often. And so that innate programming of a faith practice sort of translates into now, I feel like they imagine that these AI will be the God, the God of just bring them all together. And that also feels a bit like the noosphere. I mean, I'm sure that Hirschberg or Hesburgh would have known about Teilhard de Chardin. Like that would have been in his wheelhouse. And just, I don't know if I made this clear, but the reason that we're talking about this book and Theodore Hesburgh now is that this book, Patterns for Lifelong Learning, a report of explorations, was supported by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. So, I think that that's interesting. It was published in San Francisco in 1973. But Kellogg, I was shocked at the time. I don't even know how I came up with it. Maybe I was reading somewhere and that made me go back to the book. But to see that the Kellogg Foundation was connected with Hesburgh. And in addition to his, I know there's a Wharton name in there too. I need to look that up. But he was on the board. So University of Notre Dame is a lead in the impact finance space. They facilitated the impact investing conferences at the Vatican with the Catholic Relief Services. Starting in 2014, there was a conference in 2014, 2016, 2018, and then I think during the lockdowns, they had one that was focused on the health stuff, United to Prevent. But in addition, he was a director of the United States Institute of Peace. He's been the trustee of Notre Dame. He was the chair of the delegation on science and technology to the UN. He was a member of the Overseas Development Council. He was on the board of the Naval War College, Lynn. A member of the National Science Board. And he was a friend of Jimmy Carter, the Trilateral Commission guy, right? And among others. And so that this connection between Kellogg and all these things, I think, is interesting. And it's quite something to hear that the Catholics were really turning out en masse for the voucher discussion.
En masse.
En masse, yeah, exactly.
And I want to say this real quick because I just thought of this. There was a really great video I saw years ago, and it was Father Basio. He's in Harlem. He's a Catholic priest, and he for a long time was pushing the whole immigration and refugee resettlement thing. He thought it was, as the church, that they should take in the least of these and be, bring them as many as necessary. And then he realized when he was doing that it was taking over. So they were taking the jobs from those in Harlem who were primarily Black, wiped out jobs for them because the immigrants were getting the jobs and starting businesses, and the refugees, because they were given stipends and relief and places to live and all of those things, that it actually shifted all the resources to the immigrants and the refugees rather than the locals who were who had been there for their families, and they had been there for decades. And so he shifted. He realized this is not solving a problem. It's creating a new problem, and it's not right. He said he couldn't do it anymore, and he had to sound the alarms about it. And as a Catholic priest, he was repenting for being a part of the problem.
Wow.
Fascinating video, the way he says it, because he deeply cared about people, and that's why he was doing it. And he realizes he's harming another population.
Well, and it's important to note that the Harlem Children's Zone became this Harlem Children's Zone, which was the test bed for 30 years of Stanley Druckenmiller and Jeffrey Canada. And Druckenmiller was very close with Soros, was Soros's fund manager, and Paul Tudor Jones, the hedge fund guy, was pouring money in through Robin Hood Foundation. And so really the Harlem Children's Zone was a test bed for a lot of these wraparound services that would be tied to the human capital markets, right? So it's interesting how they play one group off against another.
So if you say anything against it, then you're immediately deemed as a xenophobe or racist or something that, you don't care about people and children and refugees.
Right. Well, so I'm just going to go through a few more of the people who were at this Learn Capital launch event. So this was Ken Ruggiero, and he is the chairman and CEO of Ascent Funding. Now, Ascent Funding has goal solutions, and again, their G and their S are in a box, so we've got a little blockchain reference hat tip going on there.
And it looks just like the Department of Ed box. It looks like our regional, that symbol is often used in education.
They want everybody in a box. Everybody's
blockchain, three-dimensional. Yes.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
So it says they are the first lender to enhance cash flow opportunities for schools by leveraging income share agreements. They have a $2 million credit facility with enabling Make School to fund their education debt free. And so these income sharing agreements are essentially, the plan is for them to be attached on blockchain, and that you enter into a contract with someone will fund your training, and then presuming you meet the terms of the contract and you get a job at a certain salary, your wages are garnished to pay back the tuition for a certain amount of time.
So I am up here to tell you guys about the tokenized income sharing agreement. My name is Josh Lawler. I'm a partner at the law firm Zuber Lawler, where I head our new technology practice. I've been practicing securities law for about 25 years and IP for about 15. And what I want you to take away from this is that this really isn't that hard, okay? We can't make the regulation come to us, but we can go to it, and it's not that hard. So the tokenized income sharing agreement. How many people here heard about Spencer Dinwiddie and what he's doing with his contract? Anybody? A couple of people up front. Well, he's basically set up an income sharing agreement. He's done some tokens. He's selling $13.5 million against $16 million of his guaranteed first MBA contract. It's an income share. It's a very basic one. The income sharing agreement's been around for a long time, but it hasn't been the best financial product. It's illiquid, it's risky, it's hard to enforce, all those things. But if you tokenize it, it gets very interesting. So you can see up on the slide there, it's flexible. So Spencer Dinwiddie is an NBA basketball player, but anything with a revenue stream can be turned into a tokenized income sharing agreement. The graduating class of Juilliard could get together and get funds upon graduation against their future income. This conference could, and notably Simon Dixon with Bank to the Future, they're doing this. When he talked about his security that was going to be a share of income that could convert into equity, that's what it is. So very flexible. They're fungible, like most tokens that are not NFTs, and that should be relatively simple, but the catch is that fungibility allows liquidity. We've got fractional. This is where pretty much anybody can invest in something, and we're seeing in the real estate market low-hanging fruit of tokenizing real estate. They're familiar, which is to say that it's an income sharing agreement. People understand income and income streams. Fully visible, and this part's key, like any other blockchain, it's auditable, it's transparent, it doesn't require trust, and fully automated, which is key. And this is where we go to the regulation. You take as many human fingerprints out of this stuff as possible. On a simple income stream, you can do Exchange Act reporting, and you can do it in an automated fashion. You can send people tax reporting forms to cover the income that goes back out to them as a return on investment. You can do it in an automated fashion. All right, so going to the regulation, everybody's aware of the securities laws and how they have presented some difficulties. What you see on the slide there, the top slide, that's where we are now. That's your private offering, that's your 506C, your accredited investors hold for 1 year. That's currently the moment. And then in parallel, we've got Regulation S, which is overseas offerings. And again, you've got a 1 year hold period, which kind of doesn't make the most liquid investment, but it's what we've got at the moment. The next step of that would be Regulation A and a Tier 2 offering exemption. And that is a spectacular little bridge because it allows you to sell your securities to anyone, and they become unrestricted securities. The catch is that the SEC has to qualify your offering document first. So far, that's only been done once or twice. But if it's a simple enough product, and notably if you do something like tying it to a share of stock, which you can do with a tracking stock, it's more familiar. And we think we can get that through. And over time, of course, an S1 is what we call an IPO, not to be confused with an ICO. And that would allow for public trading of these and listing on exchanges, et cetera. And then the last one is something that nobody really talks about in the crypto space. It's Form S3. You may have heard about a shelf registration statement. And this is where somebody will register billions, literally billions of dollars of securities in advance so that later on they can issue them more easily. And the vision that I would have here would be that there'd be a single company acting kind of as an issuer as a service that can put up an S3 and then use that on a service basis to issue many different smaller issuances, all with the appropriate disclosure. Okay, so after you've got the initial issuance, it comes down to secondary sales, and this is your liquidity on your exchanges. So the top spot there is a restricted token. That's Rule 144, and people may be familiar with it because if you did an ICO, for instance, and things have happened more than a year ago and those tokens are in other people's hands, they are actually legal for those other people to sell them to different people. They can be transferred. They're unrestricted. They can't necessarily be on an exchange. That's something different, and that's kind of the second box there. What hangs us up is that the Exchange Act requires anything that's a securities exchange to follow certain rules, be FINRA registered, et cetera, and arguably requires the securities they trade to do public reporting. So public reporting becomes very important. Nobody can trade without that. With a tokenized income sharing agreement, as opposed to, say, a share of stock, I'm not describing an entire company. I'm describing revenue streams. And depending on what those revenue streams are, that might be very easy. I mean, think about this. You've got to do a profit and loss statement. Fine, there's a revenue stream. There's nothing there. There is no balance sheet. It becomes relatively simple to do. And that then allows registered broker-dealers and FINRA and everybody else to actually make a market in these things, thus some liquidity. There's a version that you can also do that's on kind of more of a traditional crypto exchange, and I'm going backtracking, but for the flexibility point, it's all what you can imagine on these things. It's a token. It's ultimately a piece of code. I can make that into a share of stock. I can make that into not a share of stock. I can have it be both at the same time. Again, not that hard. So once you've got these things out there, the question becomes, how do you handle potential fraud on the market? And not that I expect he would do this, but let's say our hypothetical basketball player is not Spencer Dinwiddie. His agreement included an income stream from his endorsements and other types of revenue of that nature. And he goes out to a club, and the night before his shoe deal with Nike is going to drop, he tells the bouncer, and the bouncer goes out and trades it. That's a nightmare scenario. If it's security, it's insider trading. If it's not, it's probably still illegal somehow. So you've got to handle that. And that becomes a spot where we can put into play oracles and artificial intelligence to analyze trading patterns. We can work things into our contract, because remember, tokenized income sharing agreement is a contract, so we can put in whatever we need to, such that it's actually able to be rolled back, very much as if, say, the Ethereum fork were agreed to in advance. Okay, so then you've got tax compliance, and everybody's always a big fan of tax compliance, and the IRS is doing their thing with property, which is what it is. But I think what needs to happen is it just needs to be easy. And again, that's the theme, is that this should all be easy. So what makes it easy? Answer, if you're sending somebody funds, you also send them a tax reporting form, very much the way your bank does now, and you get a little thing for interest if you earned $5 on the year. That's going to be absolutely key, because the key to adoption, again, is ease. Okay, so all of that, came up with the acronym myself, Smart Contract Issue Administration Reporting Company. So as you know, I'm a lawyer. That means I'm looking for legal engagements, but we're putting together a small side project called SciArc. And the idea of SciArc is going to be issuance as a service. So very much like just an infrastructure play, take care of everything that needs to be done other than creating the income stream. But it enters into the initial contract with the sponsor, we'll call it, who does the income. It then issues the token on a code agreement, has that audited, maintains Exchange Act reporting, maintains tax reporting, acts for dispute resolution, and onwards. The underbelly of it is a little bit more complicated, and I won't get into that too much, but that's kind of the vision. And as I mentioned, it is starting to happen. I'd just like to see it more in a systematic format. I think I've got a little extra time because I spoke too fast. So if anybody's got any questions, I'll definitely answer them. And if not, then you can enjoy your coffee. Yes, sir.
But the plan is then to securitize the debt on the income sharing agreements and trade that on global markets. So this is going to be sold as the answer to student debt, right? Look, they say it's debt free. Well, it's not really debt free. It's just servitude. We're trading student debt for indentured servitude on the blockchain. But they tell themselves a nice story about it. So, and I think we had talked about, like, we'd showed that clip with Olive, on the ledger, logging her, should she do virtual reality program or Chinese and Mandarin, and then she just wants to do her passion, which is VR. So, she's going to go on the ledger and do an income sharing agreement for that. This gentleman, oh gosh, Dan Lips. Dan Lips is the education savings accounts guy. He's also with this free op group. And it says that he wrote a paper in 2005 called Education Savings Accounts, a Vehicle for School Choice. And it says they were debating whether vouchers or tax credits were better, and so he came up with this new path, and the new branding was the education savings account. And I think we were talking the last time a little bit about some of the language, right? If you find the good way of branding it, then it makes it acceptable. So that was threading the needle. And the education savings accounts, they were targeting the special needs kids first. And then kids in underperforming schools, and this idea that you would give people, a credit against what the government would pay for public schools, and you would use it other places. But, the hitch is that those accounts really are never enough to pay full tuition for a deluxe private school, the kind that the people who run these companies send their kids to, which are like $30,000 a pop and up. They're just little bits, but they'll sell people on like, oh, you can use your tax credit for hippotherapy and ride horses and do all these things, right? They're always telling you the horse stuff. And Arizona,
it drive the cost of private school too. That's the other piece that.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah,
it will do that. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and just the last thing I was going to say, so it mentions here that Arizona was the first state to do that, and that's no surprise with Michael Crow being down there. And they were early ones to develop debit cards that you would put your voucher on a debit card. But then, of course, they documented misuse of those debit cards where people would buy educational materials and then return them and then buy things that were unapproved. And
like a TV, maybe.
So essentially setting things up for the transparency, right? For the blockchain. Like, oh, if you had it on blockchain, then you wouldn't have these problems of corruption, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So I think ultimately where it's going is that there will be a digital wallet, but only certain tuitions, only certain materials will be approved, and there will be like a catalog of approved vendors, right? That you can access your debit card or your blockchain card to access for the voucher. And that's going to open up all kinds of markets for these other companies. They don't have to sell their stuff to schools. They can just do direct to consumer. So, do you have anything to add about education savings accounts or vouchers? Or I know we kind of opened with that.
Yeah, I think you're right about because we had the governor was at a private school in August, and he was talking about school choice, and one of the reporters said, well, what about accountability? And he said, well, we can't have a homeschooler just sitting there watching TV. We have to have, and the word he used was accountability measures. And then he turned to the director and asked, how are they testing? And she said NWEA maps. Well, they can't just give people the money. They're going to have some sort of accountability measures and strings and testing, and you'll have to show your receipts. And so it will do exactly what you're saying, where they'll say, okay, well, the solution to that is if we put it on blockchain, then we can prove it's used for what it's supposed to be used for. There's accountability. You've got the stamp and the ledger that would document and track these things so that people couldn't abuse it.
Right. And so actually, what I'm saying is that this goes with the LRNG model of the city as your classroom, right? Because they actually want you surveilled everywhere. They want to deconstruct public schools, and they want to send kids out with devices that are trackable and with transactions that are trackable. And this is all part of the complexity theory that is coming for the mapping sort of the networked systems. And so in the video, one of them, they were like, oh, this guy, he's running an organization that has the most educational use, like millions of people, are using this program, this learning platform. It's amazing. And
we are the world's largest online learning platform.
300 million users a month.
And it's called Brainly, how creative, right? This guy, Bill Salak, he is with Brainly, the chief technology officer. And it's interesting, but because before that, he came from ABC Mouse. So, again, really programming the young children with the digital technology, and that's where Sesame Workshop was really central to getting all of that in place. But so this Brainly thing, when I looked it up, it's interesting because I used to see like on the bus these ads for our library and that you could like dial into online tutoring or homework assistance. And it seemed pretty innocuous, right? Like nobody wants to think that the librarians could be part of anything that are like is not good. But I think this idea of a remote tutor or a remote helper, is coming, and then there are whole industries around TaskRabbit kind of digital tutors. There are whole industries that are sort of like, you rate your tutors and whatever, like a new entrepreneurship model. And so this Brainly actually gets around the idea of getting paid, and it's totally crowdsourced. So it says, join our trusted helpers team. Trusted helpers are brainiacs who volunteer their time to lend a hand to ensure that Brainly's content is high quality in all areas. So they're literally
reminds me of DataKind because they're volunteering their time to sift through all this data. It's like a brain trust.
Oh, it's interesting. So this, I think it's a learning platform, but it's using content that is crowdsourced, and then the crowdsourcing is monitored by volunteer brainiacs, right? And then it says like what you need to be a brainiac trusted helper, that you have to have an account for 3 months. You have to have answered a minimum of have 60 answers on your account. Your answers there have to be 15 answers in the last week. Your answers must consistently contain high quality explanations, and you have to maintain your activity consistently while your application is being and then you have to have a demotion to helping others with a professional and friendly attitude. So look at all of these requirements for a volunteer position to help them make their money on their like mega data mining program, crowdsourced program. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it's so predatory. And how they make them jump through all the hoops, but the continuous evolution, they're lifelong. They're in the lifelong learning model within this, that they're going to have to continuously jump through whatever. Be like this, do this.
All these other hoops.
Answer like this, and it's subjective.
Yeah. So Kevin Wu was on there. He is the founder of something called Path Rise. So they're all trying to figure out how to move money around, right?
Allison, we're
going up. We're looping, although there's a loop there, so you just might be going in circles. It's hard
going
to
up and around.
If you like ever get out of the loop. So his company
goes up, but it makes it goes back down.
Spinny rides. Yeah, so they're doing mentorship for the job search, and like I would be interested in your perspective because like I know that you spend your time, right, essentially mentoring people into like getting reconnected with the workforce. But in this, it's interesting. It is a program for tech professionals. It's online for one-to-one mentorship, and then if you land the job that you want, you pay the people. So it's some sort of thing where you take on mentees, people in these industries, and then if it's like, I guess you're sort of buying into a network, and then if you get the job you want, you pay the people back. So it feels a little bit like a bit of a Ponzi scheme there.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, we always tell the job seekers, don't do anything that requires you to pay or to join some sort of service thing with something that you have to give in return, even with the resumes. But there's so many people that prey upon job seekers because they'll take out loans, they'll do whatever, and they'll pay these people when they have promises of delivering. Yeah, it does sound like a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah. And but his prior job was for something, he founded a firm called Unboard, a game studio on doing an Android mobile adaptation of board games. So he's
like me telling you my aunt gave me the Ungame, and I was like, when I was little.
I don't remember that. What is the Ungame?
The Ungame. Like, well, what's the point? I don't understand.
There's no rules.
Nobody wins, nobody loses. It's the ungame.
The ungame. Yeah, well, it's cooperative, right? It's getting us ready for the Ant computer, the cooperative commons. So here we have the Amplify lady, Catherine McKay. She's the president and COO of Amplify Education. And, again, I have a little image on here of children on devices doing their Amplify program with, interestingly enough, a bug. It doesn't quite look like an ant. It looks like a little bit of a beetle on the poster behind. Little bugs doing their little things on tablets and Chromebooks. But how is this a technology bill, right? So yeah, do you just want to repeat, because I know we've talked a little bit about Amplify in the last sessions, but like how Amplify is linked to the OER stuff?
Yes, and so she was talking about Desmos math showing promise, but what we've been using in Texas with Amplify is the reading, and it came in through the pandemic emergency powers given to the commissioner, and he did a no bid contract with Amplify. And then it was a $50 million contract, and Amplify being funded and directed by Lorena Powell Jobs, Steve Jobs' widow, and then the Learn Capital guy, Evan Baer. They're investors in Amplify. And then you have Margaret Spellings on the board of Amplify, who was the former education secretary under George W. Bush, who's in Texas, leading Texas 2036 with Tom Luce. And they are all at the Capitol pushing through this coalition that is a PAC trying to get this bill passed, and you've got a billionaire real estate guy funding it. It's like this whole web of Texas money and power pushing. They want this bill so badly when all their kids don't get this kind of education. Their kids go to, private schools that would never do this yet.
Well, and Lorena Powell Jobs, they were funding prize schools for disruptive innovation, different school models. And so a lot of that is going to be framed coming up as project-based learning. So they're going to back off this idea of the high stakes testing, and they're going to be collecting different kinds of data, and they're going to be collecting it through projects because now they have the sensor networks and the digital identity to do that. And it's going to come through extended reality and how children and youth interact with these digital objects that they're doing. So in some ways, even though they show the kids sitting at a table with the devices, that's not their planned future. Within 10 years, they would have the kids doing some sort of hands-on project under the gaze of an AI camera, with some sort of smart class uniform and smart shoes or something like that, mirroring them because they do want to get the teaming and the social skills. So so it's going to morph.
Learns them.
Right. But people aren't cluing into where the trajectory is headed. So Glenn Giltzian, he was also one of the presenters. He's in Florida, the Central Florida Urban League in Orlando. And so I would say the thing to remember, and we'll get into this a little bit the next time, but that these simulation technologies connected with XAPI, which is what will pull the data from the wearables and the devices into the learner record, that is military technology that was coming out of Orlando specifically. So Orlando is a hub for military simulation technology and also gamification. You've got the Disney stuff and gaming, gaming enterprises in Central Florida. So it's important. And he is, he's the president of the Central Florida Urban League. The Urban League is pushing Pay for Success finance. And prior to that was the vice president of Step Up for Students, Advocacy and Community Affairs.
Going up again. Keep going up.
Yeah. So, and again, the right to choose. So he's a school choice framing, choose the educational path, guaranteeing the best development for children. But, these are the kind of people that they've been putting into place for 20 years, right? Grooming and putting in so that you can say, well, how could you oppose this? Look, if you do, then you must fit into this certain kind of category. And it's not accurate, but it's very hard to go against that narrative. Lots of virtual reality and wearables in that video. One was Wave Neuro. And I think we're going to hear much more about brain training, brain frequency, brain health. It is the steering and the extended mind format. I think some of that from what I was hearing is maybe they were directing that towards children on the autism spectrum. I heard one woman speak to that. I'm not sure if it's exactly this product. But you can see it's not just the on the head, it's behind the ear, getting these frequencies. And to me, this wave formation just totally reminded me of the wave that was in the hallway. But I'll just read from Wave Neuro. It says, it all starts with a 10-minute brainwave recording. We conduct an eyes closed 10-minute qualitative electroencephalogram, QEEG, and an electrocardiogram, so we've got the heart, again, EKG, that measures brainwave frequencies as well as heart rate and brain-heart coherence. And so they're trying to get the baselines. And I think that this connects to the Heart and Math Institute, and this connects and they're framing this I don't know. I was just listening to a lecture about it recently, and they were saying, oh, well, you should just have it as part of your annual checkup in your doctor's office to do these brainwave checkups. But I'm just wondering what this looks like in an educational setting. Are they imagining this in more of a clinical setting, or are they going to send all the kids home with one of these? It's very concerning.
Yeah, I think they'll normalize it through those who are most vulnerable. So with autistic children and special needs children, and then it'll make its way as necessary for all children.
Yeah,
if I had to guess.
Yeah. And then they had this other one, which was that you could manipulate technology with your brain.
What we've developed is a telepathic system. So it's a system you can wear on your head, and you can control technology with your mind.
That was one of the things. And I think that's this thing, a mind portal with, again, some nice magenta coating on there. And this is pretty much, this looks like straight out of Minority Report, with Tom Cruise, with the screen manipulating the data. But I pulled this from the website. It says
portal is an interesting, that's an important word, because if you're, it's accessing through portals, our brains. Yeah, that's creepy.
Well, and if you think about port too, a port, so much of this is also the Navy is doing the radar and the frequency. So this idea of a port and a portal, and
and Texas has all these ports. That is, Houston's a major port. You've got Galveston, and I think that is significant for other reasons. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it just says in the company that's launching the Mind Portal, and it looks, for people who are just listening, it looks sort of like a headband that's goes around the ears or something. Yeah, it looks sort of like a goofy headband. And
have you seen all the women wearing the goofy headbands lately?
No, I'm so not out and about.
In Texas, that's a big thing. They wear a headband, big women our age will wear full-on headbands.
Really? Yeah. I went through a headband phase, probably in high school or something, but do they have big hair?
Goodie that you got at the grocery store. But no, these are major headbands, and then the men are doing the man bun thing with the headband. Yeah, to keep their hair back.
Oh, wow. I don't know. It's probably normalizing having big things on your head, right?
Yeah. Headbands everywhere.
Well, by 2035, this is what they're imagining. Everyone owns their own personal brain computer. People communicate telepathically, mind to mind. Artificial intelligences understand human thoughts, enabling remarkable human-machine collaboration. Mental health issues are a thing of the past. You can immerse yourself into virtual realities with friends by experiencing them directly to your mind. Humans have vastly upgraded cognition, accelerating the advancement of our species. So,
flourishing.
Human flourish. Yeah, you're right. Flourishing is a key word. Just once you have your mind portal, you can flourish. It's,
perfect.
So this is just an image I took from the video of, I'm kind of looking for hidden symbology of these different things. So they have a bookcase. It's leading between the hallway into the kitchen maybe. And the bookcase, it's interesting. It has candlesticks with no candles. So I don't know, maybe that's a light reference or lack of light. But on the top of this bookcase is a 5-link chain, an oversized chain. I would say the links are maybe each 12 to 15 inches across, and it's high up. So I don't even know if you were standing there, if you would notice the the chain if you were standing next to it because it's so high up on the bookcase. But it makes me kind of wonder how they got this shot, actually, like if they were up on something high or maybe on the stairway. But when I see this chain, I think the blockchain, right? I think about the blockchaining Texas, the Blockchain Education Task Force, and that the World Bank is doing the blockchain credentialing. So, I just have a reference if people aren't familiar with the blockchain task force that the World Bank is promoting, that you can access that link through this. So, yeah, chain. All right. So now I'm just jumping over to Greg Mauro. So Greg Mauro, Mauro. He's a managing partner of Learn Capital, and he was someone that I had my eyes on a while back. This is still an entry that I had in Little Sis back when I was using Little Sis program. And he, they have these kind of crazy stories. And, I think that they decided to, bring entrepreneurs in tech together in like resort locations and create these networks. And eventually they built Learn Capital. I think it looks like 2008. So, in the aftermath of the last economic crash, the last debt finance crash, they're building the next human capital debt finance crash. And he and a colleague in 2013 actually bought the top of a mountain in Utah outside of Salt Lake City. And it was called Powder Mountain. And eventually, I think I have a slide here. It says, it's an article from The Guardian. There were a couple articles on this from The Guardian called "What Would It Look Like If Davos and Burning Man Had a Baby?" Summit is an invite-only ideas conference, is setting up a permanent home on a mountain in Utah, but cannot avoid being just another meetup for Silicon Valley tech bros. And there's like a goofy picture of like a tent and people doing calisthenics or yoga or bendable body things. I don't know. And this is from 2016. So yeah, so they bought a ski resort on the top of this mountain, and they're building an intentional community for very rich people up there. And it's interesting because so Mauro in I don't remember exactly what the date this is. He did a TED Talk in Ogden, Utah. Now, it's interesting because Ogden, Utah is also the home of the IRS, like when it has a big IRS office in Ogden. And the TED Talk was called A Town as a Startup. Again, so you think about the 15-minute town. Now, this is for super rich people, but this idea of a closed community being a startup or an organism, really, like a startup company, a startup organism, startup and computer. And they, in the slide, and I had missed this before, this town that they were setting up, Summit, was connected to Stanford University and this idea of regenerative villages. And so they were actually specifically building in the whole regenerative finance, smart city stuff and smart housing into the Summit program, in addition to all of the ed tech, because most of these people were ed tech entrepreneurs. And then I have a little slide from the Regen Villages project. And this is actually somebody from Canada. My keynote to Future Cities Canada, I'm super excited for the opportunities to realize regen villages across Canada as a means to address urgent affordable housing shortages, which is interesting because Powder Mountain is definitely not an affordable housing outpost. It's definitely an outpost of super influential techie people who've come in and taken over that corner of Utah. But, again, for people who maybe haven't listened to these talks of mine, Utah is central to virtual learning. David Wiley, who developed OER, was from Utah. Much of the digital identity space was developed with Phil Mindley at Brigham Young University. There's overlap with state intelligence and the NSA data centers in Utah. There's overlap with the biotech development out of University of Utah research centers and research labs and mental health. So everything is kind of going on in Utah, and it's definitely connected to online education. But that's the guy behind Learn Capital. And and then I actually went up and visited there a couple years ago, but it was really cold that day and there wasn't a whole lot to see. But I did make my pilgrimage up to Summit. And so we have Hannah Sheck. So Hannah Sheck is an advisor to Learn Capital. And do you, off the cuff, Lynn, do you want to say anything first about Hannah Sheck, or I can jump in?
Yeah, just what's interesting. So he was on that Corette task force with Diane Ravitch. Mm-hmm. Koret, and other people like Checker Finn and trying to think who else was on it, but there's a recurring appearance from Eric Hanushek at the legislature back when we had the special needs cap set where they denied children above 8.5%. The schools weren't allowed to serve more than 8.5% special needs kids. He's always just kind of in the shadows, and he'll come out to testify, but he's been involved for a long time. And whether it's the privatization, whether it's the teacher excellence and merit pay, he's just kind of always there.
Yeah. Well, and so his focus is on linking education to economics. And I think that's something that Texas has done a lot of. That data mining research is like sort of saying like, this is the output of education, quote unquote, reforms to economic productivity. And so all of that is the data that is data driven. And he was also promoted the use of value added measures to evaluate teachers in schools. So VAM. And VAM actually, came out of this guy, I'm trying to remember his name, but he was connected with University of Tennessee and Oak Ridge National Labs.
Oh, William Sanders. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I remember at the time them saying, well, this is an agricultural product. Like, why are we using this for children? Right. We were so naive at the time. We just didn't know how bad things actually were. But this value added measure, I kept saying, like, towards the end of my time doing more education activism, that it's not for the teachers, it's for the computer programs. The value added metrics in the long run is not going to be for human teachers. It's going to be for these OERs. It's going to be what is the best module that's going to measure, like, if you consume this digital content when you were in 7th grade and then you got, a 6-figure salary and are doing this much economic productivity, then there will be all of this interoperability of the tagging of these digital modules. So the teachers kept saying, well, I'm not in this to get, I want to get paid a fair salary, but I'm not going to do better if you pay me more. Like, I do a good job just because I do a good job, right? I don't do it for this value added thing, but it's central to what's coming next, which is using the value added model, applying to the digital media and learning. And again, it's all about the data and the simulation modeling, which is what Texas is about. And Texas was pretty much like a test bed for his project. It was called the Texas Schools Project. So he was kind of based, I guess, Hoover Institute is in Stanford, but there's a lot of overlap between California and Texas, really, like at the education level. They're not really siloed.
I forgot about the Texas Schools Project, because and UT Dana. So there are 2 people that were on my board, and Richardson, who had ties to this deal. Yeah.
So, and that's going back to the early 1990s. So this is a long time in coming. And then I know we need to sort of wrap up, but we've got Tom Vander Ark. He was an advisor to Learn Capital as well. He was the U.S. contact for Global Education Futures Forum. So when we had that conversation about the learner in the middle and all of the talent investment and family universities and portfolios, that was Tom setting that up. He's now a venture capitalist in ed tech, but he was part of the Gates Foundation, and he launched the first virtual high school in the U.S. in Washington State outside of Seattle back in the day.
Yeah, and he's featured a lot of the impact investing going on with the Commit partnership. He's written articles with Forbes, and he's deeply connected to Educate Texas and collective impact and social impact investing.
Yeah. And this is an image of the advisory board. I got it from the Wayback Machine. I don't think he's actually still on the board of Global Education Futures, which, it's quite interesting because the cover of this document is a Hieronymus Bosch painting, which is a very strange, like psychedelic kind of painting going on there. And occasionally I would tell people like, oh, you tinfoil hat person, whatever. And I'm like, well, just look at who's involved, and you can see this is serious. So among the other people on this advisory board, beyond Tom Vander Ark served with, was Simon Bartley of the World Skills International. Let's see, Dirk van Dem of the OECD, Alexander Laszlo, Irvin Laszlo's son, Claudio Naranjo, who is a Gestalt psychotherapist and founder of the SAT Institute, Howard Reingold from Stanford, Tan Un Seng, who is the director of the National Institute of Education in Singapore, Alexei Stinikov at Skolkovo Technology, which is like the MIT of Russia, and Charles Fidel of the Center for Curriculum Redesign, and that was out of Harvard, and I think maybe connected to Intel. So these are like heavy hitting people who are involved. And then we've got this is a map that they did, which again, sometimes people say like, oh, how do you figure all these things out? And I'm like, well, I found the map and I pay attention to the news. And if you have the map, it just tracks. Like they just say so this is a foresight document of education from 2015 to 2035. But, including on this document, they have things about peoplenaires, people who are rich in human capital, and they even have things called like student genetic passports. And I pulled this out on the slide, and it says, and there's a block next to it. So again, blockchain, identity, your Learn card. Students will get individualized recommendations on their education in accordance with their genotype. So think about how this meshes with OER, Lynn.
Yeah.
Like here, let us like swab your nose and tell you what modules you're allowed to look at. I mean, and I just don't know why more people aren't outraged by all of this. It's just, it's insanity. So Pavel Luksha developed the Global Education Futures. He was the lead. He was a Russian guy. And he's a transhumanist. And so I have a couple of slides here from his slide shares about transhumanism and skills. So his big thing is skill building, and that goes back to the skills guy, Simon Bartley. Skills of the future towards radical innovation in education. And it says that reality will blur, that we will automate routine physical labor, that human capital will be the key in globalization, that we will transform the roles of companies, governments, and communities, and technologies will change the reality of manufacturing and change social reality. So this is all being laid out. Like, did any of this come up in the mayoral forum discussion like that I was at on Tuesday? None of that came up. None of that. And this slide deck is from 2010, Lynn. The slide deck's from 2010. And like even in 2023, we're not even talking about it. But then the other
you get no time to talk. Like if I wanted to even scratch the surface on this, I get 2 minutes. Every year we get fewer and fewer minutes to talk. Next year it'll be 1 minute, and then they'll just say, we don't need to hear from the people.
Well, but you scored kind of a good chunk of time the last time by asking questions. So maybe you could throw out the student genetic passport the next time you talk about OER and say, hey, this is the plan. This is Tom Vander Ark, who is connected to Learn Capital down the block. This is what they say, that students will get objects based on their genotype. So can we talk about this?
I need you to move to Texas. Can you move here? You were born here. Come back.
But I think, do we have any questions? And then he could just say, and then maybe they'll ask a question. You did that.
Can we do that?
Can we do that? Can we have a conversation about genetic phenotyping and OER? And then the other thing is I have this NeuroWeb, Pavel Luksha's slide shares on trend. It's NeuroWeb roadmap enacting our transhumanist future. This is from 2014. So yeah, so from skills to transhumanism, and that's and there they are. They've got, here's Pavel and Tom yucking it up about skills, the future of skill building, and the skill building. That's what OER is about. It's about hop into a game. Do some virtual teaming with people from around the world, and maybe some AI creatures, non-playable characters. Show us how you think. We're monitoring your biometrics, your galvanic skin responses, your heart rate, and we'll know what we're going to slot you into in the future, right? Maybe we'll stretch you a little bit. Maybe we'll stretch your mind. Maybe we'll do a little mental engineering in there. But we'll develop your architectural profile to decide who you are in this game that we're playing with you. And
Vander Ark's been to Texas, and I've seen him talking to people in Houston. Yeah, he's really heavily connected to these Texas guys who are. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, and so I just want to this is sort of what we're dealing with them. We're gonna they want to invite us into their portal so we can learn. Only it's the inversion. It's the AI learning from the children. When I was talking the other day, the kids campaign at the mayoral forum promoting all of the stuff that'll be impact finance, it was called Secure. They wanted the children to be secure. And it was all about fear porn and securing, but they want to secure the children as a digital asset.
Oh, that's a good, yeah, because safety and security is a huge topic right now in schools.
Yeah, it was all about gun violence and how we need, and a lot of that was feeding into the out of school time learning conversation too, right? Like we need the children managed through the violence that feeds in the OST stuff.
I hate to even say it out loud, but it's just like you can just feel it coming that they will have more violent events happening in the schools as the trigger for getting kids out of schools and doing the out of seat time learning. I can see it lining up through what's happening with the governor and the legislature.
Yeah.
Sadly, and people will be sacrificed for it.
I mean, did you hear anyone in the OER discussion really talking about blockchain, that this was linked to blockchain?
No, but there was one person who addressed it, and I need to go back and figure out who said it. But they did talk about the digital ID and blockchain tracking. Yeah. Somebody did, but I can't remember who it was. So yes.
I mean, did it land? I mean, did the people? I mean,
no. I mean, it's just not. They're so defensive anyway, and they just want to hear from the people who are going to
affirm their point of view.
This and anybody else. I mean, I do trigger them to want to argue, but it was moving really quickly that night, and so there were 150, 200 people to sign up. That's why we're there till 2 a.m.
Oh my gosh! And what percentage of them were promoting? Like, how many were for? Like, the majority were promoting.
I would say majority were for, but yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, how would you characterize the opposition? People who were against? Like, what were the main talking points?
Well, the good thing is that normally it would be those who are politically on the left, like the teachers' organizations, or those who are, diehard public school proponents. And then you find primarily those on the right are the ones pushing the vouchers and the privatization and all the exit options and school choice and parent empowerment. But what happened with the group that I was with, most of them were talking about, hey, I'm coming from the conservative side, and I'm saying it's conservatives who have been in charge, and they broke the system, and now they're bringing in this fake solution, and we're sounding the alarm saying, no, that's not going to solve anything. And we see what you're doing. We see those in the audience who broke it and are now here to promote this fake solution. So yeah, and then those on the left are like, oh yay, they're calling out the governor. Oh yay, they're calling out privatization. So it is bringing people who have this awareness together, and that happened at the state board as well. People who normally would be totally against us are like, wait, what did you just say? They're perking up and like, huh. Well, and then they want to give you their card and say, hey, call me.
Yeah. Well, what about were there homeschool people who didn't want the vouchers? Did any of those testify? Like, we don't want your accountability stuff in our business?
I would say there were more who were there who did want it. But the reality is in the homeschool camps, I would say it's swinging probably 60-40. It used to be about 50-50 wanted it and 50 didn't want it. But now it's about 60%, I think, are cluing in. Oh, these are we don't want anything to do with the government school, much less the government solution to, with school choice vouchers. They don't want the money. They know there are strings, and all of the bills have strings or some sort of stipulation or some sort of tracking, or you have to report receipts and that kind of thing like that. Yeah. All those things.
All right. Well, I know you have to get on to your other things. Okay. So the next session we're going to get a little bit into the military simulation technology. And again, the bill sponsor came from Killeen, which is where Fort Hood is based. So I think and Austin is a center for defense innovation technology. So yay. See you next time.
Okay. Thanks, Allison.
All right. Bye.